Welcome back to the grand finale of the Projecting the Top 100 series, a hoopball presentation. I'm Alan Strokey, joined again by the wonderful, magnificent Harry Shedler, man. We finally made it.
We
5
finally
videos
made
on
it.
this. We did
Right.
it. Or I guess we're doing it right now.
We're doing it. Yes, it's still, still in process.
Yes. Technical difficulties, scheduling difficulties. You and I have gone through the ringer on this series, but guess what?
Mhm.
We are here at the end. And we have 6 more teams to cover with y'all today. If you are just catching up, probably not. Harry and I just go through each of the teams in the NBA, all 30 of them. And we are just talking about on each team which players we think will be in the top 109 category leagues this season. Today we are hitting the Blazers through the Washington Wizards. You feel like we're gonna make it within those 100 picks? We projected exactly 100 guys.
I think we'll be close, but I'm not sure we'll make it to like a full 100. You and I both had a little bit of different strategy. I went heavy on the front end. You went a little heavier on the back end.
I went pretty heavy on the front end too. But I like to think that I didn't leave anyone out because I was trying to get under the limit, but it's entirely possible that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But we will at the end of this show. I have the totals. I have the grand totals for my top 100 projections in Harry's. So we will see if we were under or over that amount, and if so, over or under, we will take away or add players to the list. Just a little bonus slide at the end for y'all. Again, if you like this stuff, you like any of the stuff we've been doing all off season, if you just like hoop ball in general, drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel for more stuff. The regular season is upon us. It is coming within days. So you're just going to want to keep sticking around for the stuff that we have lined up for you all fantasy season long. So without further ado, let's kick things off. First team for the day. There you are, the Portland Trailblazers. Now, this is a pretty straightforward team, I think, from a fantasy perspective. Though they did add a couple of interesting names this offseason, which I guess we can get to in a little bit. But we both have Lillard, McCollum, Covington, Nurkic as top 100 guys. I think that's all fair, not much of a debate. And then Norman Powell for me, I included him as well. And I can just say my defense of Powell is when he was traded to the Blazers, and a lot of these games were alongside CJ and Nurkic as well. I mean, if y'all recall, those two were injured for pretty much half of the year last year. But Powell is a top 100 guy. To me, he is one of those players who has a very consistent. He hit the floor and the ceiling for Powell is like this wide. It's not. He is a top 80 guy. He'll be somewhere between the 90s and the 80s, I feel like, this year. He's an efficient scorer who can give you some threes, just a solid wing to add at the end of your drafts. I feel good about his prospects. There might not be like Nurkic and Covington don't command a lot of usage. Maybe Nurkic a little bit more so, but I think that there's still plenty for Powell to get involved. It just offensively, he just needs a modicum amount of shots to get fantasy value, about 12 per game. And I don't think that he'll have an issue getting to that on this team. So that's why I included him. Harry, was there a reason you left him off?
I just thought he would be like on the cusp, like right at that 100 area. And given that the Dame's usage, CJ's usage, and Nurkic's usage, especially with the new coach and Chauncey Billups, I was just a little hesitant, but I do definitely see the fantasy value. He's also a good source of steals, especially in the later rounds. He was waffling a little bit for me just on whether to put him in or not. So I ended up not putting him in, but he's right there.
Yeah. And like I said, he doesn't have a particularly high ceiling. I just think that he just does enough to get himself right in that range. But,
right.
So right at the cusp of top 100 in or out is a fair valuation. The only other name that I'd say would be worth talking about in Portland is one of their new additions, Larry Nance Jr., acquired from Cleveland over the offseason. He is going to be their backup 4 and 5. Going to play a good amount, I would imagine. The thing with Nance is that he's always fighting through injuries. But I think that he is looking down the barrel of a bench role that could potentially have him playing in the mid-20s minutes wise, and that's an area where he has gotten at least close to top 100 value in the past. But personally, I think that if he's going to make that cut on the season, it's probably going to have to come through an injury to that Portland front court for him to get a little more consistency in minutes off the bench. And frankly, he needs to stay healthy himself. But, one of the best sources of steals of any player in the NBA, much less out of your center spot, so he or forward spot, either one. He's a guy that I would definitely take after those first 100 picks. You want to shore up boards and steals in particular, with a little bit of upside just in case there's any injuries in this Blazers front court, which, let's be honest, that's not uncommon from what we have seen.
Yeah, no, it's a good bet.
Yeah, so Nance is on my radar, but not a sure bet for top 100 value, so I can include him. Also, 6 players seems excessive for one team. So let's mosey on along to the next team, Harry. We've got who we got? The Kings, the Sacramento Kings. Oh, the Kings. We have yet another year of Luke Walton somehow.
They fired too many coaches in recent years. Like, they have to keep them.
Yeah, but I feel like they should have fired Walton sooner than any of those other ones.
That's fair.
They attached their horse to the wrong wagon. But maybe not. We'll see. Kings have a lot of talent. We only included 3 guys each. I went with De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Halliburton, and Rashawn Holmes. You, instead of Halliburton, went with Harrison Barnes. So I'm going to flip it to you for the first one here. What was your decision for going with Barnes over second-year guard Hallie?
I think it's similar to kind of your point with Powell. Harrison Barnes is great for consistency, like great field goal percentage, solid assist from a guy who doesn't, you don't think of handling the ball, gets you a decent amount of rebounds, and he's not going to blow you away in the top 100 conversation, but I believe last year he was a top 80 player, and I definitely see that happening again. But with Halliburton, I was a little concerned with the drafting of Davion Mitchell. On top of that, already having Buddy Hield in the play, there's a whole minutia of guards all around the same size that just concerns me a little bit. And I'm just being a little hesitant towards the outside of De'Aaron Fox, the Sacramento guards at the moment.
And look, that is something that's worth noting on this team. They have a lot of guard depth and depth that they have invested draft capital in. Davion Mitchell being the latest example. He figures to play a decent bench role, I'd say, this year for a rookie. And then the other guard, obviously, is Buddy Hield, who we can talk about in a little bit, who's another guy who has had top 100 seasons in the past, but you and I did not include him here. For me, I went with Halliburton over Barnes. Well, really, I think, Halliburton, I feel like in a 9-cat league unlike Powell, he doesn't rely on usage for his value. I think that he gets the percentages and low turnovers in particular are really what sets him apart as a 9-category leagues player. They were elite as a rookie, and just in a way where I anticipate that to maintain and perhaps even grow as he continues to develop. I think he's their starting shooting guard this year, and I think that he still plays a good amount. So, I mean, you combined, 10, 11 shots per game, probably 10, closer to 10, with those good percentages, a trickle of assists, a little steal here and there. I think that he just does enough. He's one of those low usage players that will find his way into this range without needing to shoot the threat off the ball. The thing, with Barnes, he had a great year last year. I think I'm skeptical that he's going to come out and score 16, 17 points per game like he did last season. Like, it was,
gotcha.
It just seemed like that was a little too high. And I think that as this team continues to, as De'Aaron Fox starts getting closer to his prime, as Halliburton takes on a larger role in the offense, I just feel that Barnes is going to take more steps back offensively, and he'll be on the cusp. I don't think he's going to be bad this year. I just would be surprised if he's averaging the same level of scoring that we saw previously.
Gotcha.
Before, but it's not a bad call to assume. I think he's going outside the top 100 in most drafts. I've completed 3 up to this point, and he's gone well outside the top 100 in all of them, and he's been a great pick because I think that he's a boring fantasy player, but he does provide some value. Now, Buddy Hield's the name that's absent here, and for me, this one's it's a little more narrative based, but it's something that we have seen so many times before, and it's not impossible to assume that this happens again. Buddy Hield was effectively traded this offseason publicly. He was traded to the Lakers, and then he wasn't. He had his bags packed. The deal was out there, and then the Wizards came in and swept Russell Westbrook in for all those same guys. This is a guy who has wanted out of Sacramento for a little bit now. He was right there on the cusp. He now knows definitively that the organization is ready to move on. And let's be honest, the package wasn't all that great. Right. I am afraid that Hield is going to be a little mentally checked out. He's going. I think that he's losing that starting position for sure to Tyrese Halliburton. At the very least, drafting Davion Mitchell is another indication that they are pivoting away from him, and he's effectively their fourth guard. I think Hield is more talented than that, and probably believes that he is. I think that he's just, I don't know, for a guy who you need to rely on for consistent shooting. I'm just maybe too focused on narratives, but we've seen this happen so many times with players who are publicly traded and then aren't. They're ready to go. And he's going to get traded presumably this season at some point. And depending on what kind of situation that is, maybe he'll get to a top 100 level, but he's someone that I've just been tending to avoid just because I have really no idea how to expect his role on this team, his level of care to play on it. So.
No, definitely agree with you on the potential downside of him just not caring. The one thing, this is where it concerns me with Halliburton, is just the lack of shooting. And maybe he takes a big jump, but he wasn't known last year for being the best shooter. Is Luke Walton really going to run a lineup led by De'Aaron Fox out there, until Buddy Hield gets traded, hypothetically, without some more shooting out there? That's where it concerns me. But completely agreed. I wouldn't touch Buddy Hield unless we see something starting probably 2 weeks from now, because I'm guessing these first 2 weeks are going to be a little rough for him.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Maybe we're overstating it. Maybe not. He's clearly just not in their plans.
Right.
And he knows that. So take with that what you will. But that is why he's not on either of our lists. Let's go to the Spurs. Very straightforward lists here. DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Jakob Poeltl. We both agree these are all top 100 guys. Poeltl in particular. He's now being drafted in the appropriate range, but this was a guy who was putting up top 75 numbers since ascending to the starting lineup last year. I think that's going to hold pretty well. Really, I think that there's not much debate about these names. I think that people who are watching, they might be curious about another relatively high-profile name on the Spurs, like relative to the Spurs, high profile, but a name that people are definitely interested by. That's Keldon Johnson, third-year forward. Likely their starting power forward or small forward, depending on how they use Doug McDermott, who I guess is also a starter in San Antonio. But Keldon, he got some play in the Olympics. He kind of hopped onto the scene last year. Like early on in the season, he was really good. A lot of points, a lot of boards. But as the year went on, the lack of fantasy game started to emerge for Keldon, in that he doesn't shoot threes. He doesn't get you assists or really any kind of defensive stats at all. The percentages are just kind of fine, nothing totally like extraordinary. But I think that's kind of it. I think he's in a lot of ways similar to John Morant, where he has pretty impressive scoring numbers, and then the rebounds look pretty good too, like sort of like Morant's assists. But then there's a whole lot of nothing around that. And I wonder, I'm not denying that this is a talented guy, and he could crack that top 100 area, but he wasn't even close last year on the full totality of the season. So I left him off just because I think that I want to see it before I believe it first in terms of 9 category top 100 value for Keldon. Was that sort of your rationale too, or is there any other reason you left him off?
No, absolutely. I think that if he has a decent year, I feel like I'm talking to a whole lot of bubble guys, like on the bubble, cracking the top 100. But if he has a decent season, similar to last season, I think he could, but better. I think he could crack the top 100, but definitely need to see that improvement and maybe pick him up on the free agency wire.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those situations for me. I feel like he's going to get overdrafted, just in that he's going to be taken right after those first 100 picks. And like, I'm not going to criticize anyone for taking anyone at that range, because that's where you just take your shots. But I think that we've listed a bunch of other interesting guys that will be available at that range who have better fantasy games than Keldon. But I mean, look, the path isn't necessarily that difficult to envision. If his efficiency gets a little closer to the 50% range, the turnovers stay low, there's an avenue for improvement in that capacity. Higher efficiency would mean more points. He gets more boards. Like, it's I don't think it's that steep of a climb for Keldon, but I'm not sure if he's quite there yet. So,
and there's definitely a vacuum in San Antonio since DeMar left. So for that usage, whether it be through more scoring, more assists, there's something to be had there, and he could fill it.
Yeah, he absolutely could. Not to mention that, DeJounte and Derek White have both, who are likely to take on the majority of that usage.
Agreed.
They have been guys who have been known to miss games here and there as well, which means that Keldon, in the pecking order, he is closer to the top of that usage pie share than he was last year. And the guys ahead of him have some tenuous relationships with health. So, we'll see. So yeah, he's definitely interesting to me. He's not a write-off guy.
Right.
He's a fringe guy at this given point in time. So we'll see. We'll see if he can make that leap. Next set of guys, the Toronto Raptors. I have Fred VanVleet, Anunoby, and Pascal Siakam. You have the same 3, but I included Chris Boucher as well. And again, not really any debate with these first 3. Siakam is hurt, and he's going to start the year on the shelf. But I don't think there's really. I know people are lower on him than they have been previously. There's no chance he's not a top 100 player unless that shoulder injury really just hampers him all year long, and he's in and out of the lineup, and it's just become some sort of outlier season. If all things are equal and Siakam is just being Pascal Siakam and he's out there, he's a top 100 guy.
Right.
Boucher's an interesting one. He blasted onto the scene last year in a very interesting way. Per game numbers were fantastic. Very inconsistent just in terms of production, but even how many minutes Nick Nurse gave him. People look at the block shots and they're like, well, this guy is just an elite defender. He's not. He's just not, and that's why he loses minutes, and it's why it comes inconsistently with him. I put him on there because the per game stuff is just so elite, but there's a legitimate conversation to be had about really just the center rotation in Toronto in general, because there's really 3 guys who are going to be competing for minutes there. Harry, why don't you just talk a little bit about why you left Boucher off and what you kind of anticipate for that center rotation this year?
So for me, I left him off because he kind of burned me last year.
Yeah, like a lot of people probably. Yeah.
Exactly. Picked him up. And then one of the things, he just has a very frail frame for being as tall as he is. And there's a lot of really big men out there right now. And can he hang against the Joel Embiids, Jokic, Karl-Anthony Towns, Dwight Howard? Hell, even Anthony Davis looks like he's a monster compared to Chris Boucher. So that's where I'm concerned he's not going to get the minutes solely because of the matchups. And then on top of that, he has a very love-hate relationship with Nick Nurse at the moment. He'll put him in and then pull him like within 3 minutes. So that's kind of where I'm at with him. I'm just like, plenty of upside, but I just don't see it like actually following through.
And it's worth noting too that he is starting the year injured. I believe that he's going to be out the first couple of weeks or so. So he's falling pretty far in drafts. Depending on your format, that could make him, I think, a really interesting target. Like if you're in a Games Caparoto format, for example, he's the kind of guy that if he's in the 80s, I think that's a very solid pick, just a nice upside shot. But you're correct that as nice as the numbers are for Boucher, the play on the how it translates to winning on the court is not exactly square with that, and that has had an impact. Not to mention, Kim Birch is in town. Acquired last year off of waivers. He was decent for them. He's really a backup center in the NBA, but he did start over Boucher. And then Precious Achiuwa, second-year guy from the Miami Heat, made some waves in the preseason and is likely going to, because Boucher's hurt, to start the season. I mean, Achiuwa is going to get a nice, decent chunk of minutes at that 5 spot, and it's not impossible for him to carve out a consistent role full season long. He's a name that I'm pretty interested in. The fantasy stat set just wasn't there for him at all last year. I mean, he was well outside the top 200, really any sort of metric that you would assign to a fantasy value guy. But he's got some upside as a rebounder, and he does seem to have some decent touch around the rim. It'll be interesting to see if, it's going to be him and Birch holding down that role to start the year. He is the upside shot of those two for sure. And he's going to get an opportunity. I'll be interested to see, I don't think that he could be a top 100 guy. We don't really know a whole lot about Achiuwa because he didn't play all that much for Miami, but he is someone definitely who's worth monitoring. In particular, how many minutes he can carve out long term once Boucher ultimately does return to the lineup. But for now, I feel on a per game basis, I feel comfortable rolling with these 4,
Gotcha.
or just 3 like you did. I don't think that
right.
I don't think it's there's the center rotation is kind of in flux there, and it's definitely worth monitoring as we go forward through this season.
Absolutely.
Next team, second to last team, the Utah Jazz. The top 3 is pretty set in stone: Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, and Mike Conley. And you included Joe Ingles as a 4th, who he floats around those fringes. We're going to have you talk about another bubble guy, but talk us through why you included Ingles in this top 100 list here.
I feel like a lot of people just have their guys in like the top 20, top 30. Like Joe Ingles is my guy in like where you pick from 100 to 120. I'm like, all right, I need some threes. I need some assists a little late in the draft. And then he usually comes through. I think it was 2 seasons ago where he was out of the top 100, but last season, I believe he was back in it. He's kind of my guy.
I don't knock it. I mean, Ingles has definitely had some incredible stretches for me when I've had him on some of my fantasy teams. He is just he's just an interesting player with a unique stat set to his game.
Right.
And typically, if he's going to get to that top 100, I think it's just going to come through the form of Conley missing time or Donovan Mitchell missing time, just him taking the next step in that rotation. But, he operates really well as running the offense with the second unit. And he's going to continue doing that. I mean, Utah got like marginally better this offseason. They added Rudy Gay off that bench, who I like. They have Hassan Whiteside, who I don't like, but he's a fine backup center. They have some options for him in that second unit to continue to defer to offensively, get those assist numbers up. But like you said, he is kind of a fringy-er guy. I could have included him, but I just didn't feel the most confident that he's going to get there. And then again, it's worth mentioning that Jordan Clarkson's also on that bench. He's a guy that is going around those first 100 picks.
Not
my cup of tea.
Those scoring guards kind of concern me. I feel like they're hit or miss every single year.
Pretty much. All it takes. I mean, Clarkson had a very efficient year relative to last year. I mean, he was good. I mean, he was really good within his role. I don't know. There's not enough there for a 9-category league for me to get excited.
Right.
So that is that. Oh, some breaking news, by the way. This is not really a format for it, but let's just go for it. Jaren Jackson Jr. has agreed to a 4-year, $105 million contract extension. So
good for him.
Good news for
Yes.
JJJ. I mean, look, it's quite the investment in a guy who has been pretty hurt to start his young career, but he's absolutely got that talent and upside. As of recording, this is 11:30 Eastern time. The deadline for these 2018 rookies to get their contract extensions is coming up today, and we're still kind of waiting to hear what happens with DeAndre Ayton in Phoenix. So,
I mean, yeah, it's kind of nuts how Triple J got his contract extension done, and DeAndre Ayton just made it to the finals.
And McCall Bridges just got his contract extension done the other day. He was teammates with Ayton.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Oh, Phoenix, don't screw it up. Don't screw this up.
Just be consistent for a while. That's all we're asking.
Take the layup. Just do it. Anyway, let's talk about a far more stable team, the Washington Wizards.
The
last team on our list. These are a ragtag bunch of different guys right now, but you and I both chose 2 players. Bradley Beal obviously is the common denominator, but we have a different guy for these second slots. I have Daniel Gafford, and you have Spencer Dinwiddie. So, Harry, I'm going to kick it to you. What do you see in Dinwiddie and 9-cat leagues this season?
So outside of Beal, I see the most usage on the team. And that's where I know he struggles with free throw percentage for a point guard. Not the best at assists, but I just think he's going to have the most usage and the most chance to actually perform. And the rest of this team, there's like 3 people at every single position that feels like they should be an NBA starter or at least a 6-man. And so that's where I was just like, both Bradley and Spencer are the 2, like, no doubt they're starting. There's not going to be any issues on who's getting the ball. It's going to be Bradley and then Spencer. And then after that, who knows?
Yeah, that's valid. I mean, I think you're correct in you're saying that Dinwiddie is looking down, like he is going to hold down the most usage on this team besides Beal. He's the only guy on this team that I feel confident in getting to at least a 30-minute per night role. There's not really much in the way of a backup point guard situation. Rahul Neto is back there. They got Aaron Holiday from the Pacers this past offseason. Both of those guys can play some point or some 2-guard. But Dinwiddie's going to hold down the majority of those minutes, health permitting. I left him off because the 9-cat game has just never been there. It's all score, it's all points, and it's all assists. He's not a good 3-point shooter, so he doesn't really give you a whole lot in that category. The percentages are bad. The defensive stats are non-existent. To me, he's always profiled as just kind of an overhyped Reggie Jackson. I'm not trying to be like, I'm not trying to I like Dinwiddie. I do like his fit next to Beal. I just don't see the 9-cat game personally. He might just have enough usage to where he'll override those deficiencies, but I feel like he's going to need to add just at least some consistency with the shot to get to this range. And again, he hasn't played in nearly 2 years now, so it's going to be maybe more so a year and a half. So it's going to be a little tough for me to trust him within those first 100 picks. I prefer to draft him after that first 100. But I chose Daniel Gafford, who I believe is going to be their starting center. I believe that he'll be able to hold on to that role even when Thomas Bryant returns, because I just think that I think that what Gafford offers just as a defender, as pure upside in general, I think that he is just a better player than Thomas Bryant. And what he proved when he got to Washington last year is that he does not need a lot of playing time to get to top 100 value. He only played about 18 minutes per night, and he was right on that top 100 cusp. almost 2 blocks per game, about 6 boards, 10 points on really high field goal percentage. I anticipate that he's going to play more than 18 minutes per night this season. But even if he does, even if that's where he like caps out with, because remember Montrezl Harrell's in town as well.
Yeah.
I think that Gafford is just one of those, I think that he's going to just make that range as so long as he's playing consistently.
Right.
Because, Scott Brooks was just yanking him around. I mean, there was nights where he'd only play 6 minutes. There was nights where he'd play 20. So that 18-minute average is just kind of what it came to through fighting through inconsistency. I'd be hoping that Wes Unseld Jr. Has a little more faith in him as the starting center and hopefully gets him over 20 minutes a night, where I think he'll really thrive as a guy who collects just a heap of block shots for you.
I definitely hope that as a resident near Washington, D.C. But I think the big thing that concerned me is the potential for a 3-player time suck between Gafford, Montrez, and Thomas Bryant when he's healthy. That's where I was just like, I need to see it before I'm there on Gafford. Hopefully it's soon.
I get it. Yeah. Well, we will find out. Bryant is projected to come back sometime in mid-December. So Gafford does have about a good month and a half stretch of holding down at least half of these center minutes.
Right.
Real quickly before we wrap up this final team and then move on to our final tallies for the series, the others on the Wizards, the other guys, worth a blurb. Kyle Kuzma, Rui Hachimura, Denny Avdia, Davis Bertans, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I feel like I'm missing 3 or 4 more forwards on this team who are all going to be competing with one another for playing time at the small forward spot and at the power forward spot. And my question to you, Harry, is there any of them that do you feel confident that any of them can separate themselves from that pack and compete for top 100 value this year in non-cat leagues?
Confident? No. I do. I like the chances of Kyle Kuzma getting near it, but I don't feel confident about it. Every single one of them, there's just going to be, I feel like it's a mixed match type of team. If you had 2 better stars and you had this supporting cast, it'd be an all-star or it'd be like an NBA Finals team year in and year out. But it's just too much to gauge between Rui, Kyle, KCP, and Bertans. Yeah.
I just don't really know where this Wizards team is going directionally, and that's kind of what makes it difficult because for Bradley Beal wants to stay there. Despite the fact that this team could not be farther away from contention, they have youth, but they also have a lot of vets. They want to compete, but they know that they're not elite. So, I don't really know what that means. Clearly they would want to develop Rui Hachimura and Denny Avdia. I would assume first round picks of the last 2 seasons. Kuzma probably figures to be a starter on this team at one of those 2 slots. I mean, both Hachimura and Avdia are not going to be ready for the start of the season.
Right.
But then above all else, none of those guys have really displayed an aptitude for having a 9-category friendly fantasy game. Kuzma never really has. Hachimura never really has. I will say Denny kind of has. His rookie year, he's one of those guys who can do a little bit of everything. He has some upsides as a trickle of assists here, a dash of steals there, some boards and threes. But he's going to need the playing time.
Yep.
And he's going to be competing with Kuzma, and he's going to be competing with KCP, who is being slept on a little bit as a guy who could carve out a decent role as a starting small forward on this team if Wizards are trying to be competitive for some reason. There's
they want that 10th spot.
They are gonna fight like hell for it, and Bradley Beal will sign a 5-year, $180 million extension while they're doing it. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I guess of that crop, Avdia is the guy that I'd keep an eye on as the season progresses and see if he can carve out a consistent role at one of those 2 forward spots. But this team's really just kind of a jumbled mess at the moment from my estimation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of bodies there. So we'll see where that ends up going. But Harry, we did it. We did it. It's that's 30 teams down. But was it 100 players projected? You may be wondering how close. All these names that Harry and I rattled off. Did we get to 100? Did we get over? Where were we in that estimation? I'll tell you, we were pretty damn close. And surprisingly, we had the same amount of players that we had put on these lists throughout these 5 videos. We ended at 103 each. 103 players in the top 100. I'm going to be set to just do this off the cuff and not keep track as we go and just kind of take a cumulative look at the end. That's pretty impressive, man. I think that we got a good read on a lot of the valuable players in the just 9 category pool of guys. So here's what we're going to do. Let's narrow this list down. Let's think of the players that we've talked about.
Yep.
We'll take 3 off the board, and I'll go ahead and give us the free square. Kyrie Irving was someone we put in that top 100 at the very first video when we talked about the Brooklyn Nets. And Kyrie might not play a game all year. So he might be a name that we could just take off and be cool with that. I will say, though, just as a segue, I do like Bruce Brown. If you guys are watching at this part of the video, sneaky last pick, Bruce Brown. He's going to be starting, and he's going to be a top 100 guy if he is a starter all year, I'd say. But let's just pretend for our purposes that we're not swapping Bruce Brown out with Kyrie.
Right.
Harry, thinking back on some of the players that we talked about, who are some that you might retract from this list to get us down to 100?
So the first one that comes to mind is the one that I technically already took out in Jeremy Grant. Alan, you made a great case against him being in the top 100. And I was just like, I hadn't thought about all the usage that everyone else is going to need on that team, and is he going to be able to get all the shots that he needs? So I'm going to take him out, and I think he will probably be on the bubble, like that 101 to 115 range. But yeah, that's where I'd put him at.
Yeah, and look, I mean, wow, what did I just do to my camera? I'm very saturated, but we're gonna dial it back now. There we go. I still hold, to holding Grant out of that top 100 range. I got a little pushback about that because I think that he is. And look, Pistons fans know more than I do. They watch that team, and I've heard compelling arguments that say, like, look, this man was asked to do way too much. He was just flat out fatigued at the end of last year. That's all fine. That's all well and good. I just do think that his fantasy game does rely. I still, at the end of the day, it's going to be so usage dependent. I just think that, he might still be the number one option at the beginning of the year, but Cade Cunningham should be that guy. Sadiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart should have larger roles in the offense. I just think that unless he takes another leap forward and returns to where he used to be back in, Oklahoma City and Denver, where he was this defensive stat-oriented guy, which he blocked a shot last year, but the defensive stats definitely came down as he became more of this offensive-minded player.
Right.
He's just a tricky one to me in 9-cat leagues, and I still stand by keeping him out. I also had one what I wanted to have taken back after I put him up there, and given the news that it came out since that video, I stand by that even firmer. Karis LeVert was someone that I had as a top 100 player that I wanted to retract just because of the giant, there's a lot of usage suck potential going on in Indiana. TJ Warren is still out indefinitely, though. LeVert has a fractured back. It makes it sound way worse than it is. I mean, he's fine. He's moving. I saw a video of him getting shots up, but he has a fracture somewhere in his back, and he's going to miss some time. I just think that a lot of the usage, like LeVert's going to be more of a cusp player. I think the percentages, I'm skeptical that they can be as high this upcoming year as they were last season, because last year, I mean, they weren't like blowing out of the water incredible, but LeVert has historically been a really poor shooter from both the field and the line. And last year we saw him take some leaps in both categories. And I'm not saying that that's impossible for him to maintain, but it is a reason to be wary that it might not potentially. And again, he played through a lot. He picked up a lot of slack when Malcolm Brogdon and Sabonis and Miles Turner all suffered injuries at different points, and just created this situation where he was this number one guy. So I'm taking LeVert out as well, which means we each have one player left to go for. So anyone else that you were thinking of removing from your lists gone by?
So the last one is Devontae Graham. Yeah, he hasn't had a good preseason. Not at all.
It's been tough. I love Devontae Graham. That Kansas run was. I'm like, man, this guy is gonna be something when I was watching him play there, and he did. He did become a quality NBA player. But sorry, I'm just.
Oh no, you're good. I have a few other friends who are big Kansas supporters, and they're probably gonna hate this, but yeah, he hasn't done well since preseason started, and they got either Satoransky there to take over point guard duties, or Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like they have other options that can perform, and they need someone to actually perform, especially with Zion out. So if he can get it going, then maybe gets to 99, 98, but I'm concerned.
It's a fair point. I tend to be cautious with point guards in brand new situations. In those early months, there's a lot of times you see them struggle out the gate, learning the tendencies of their new teammates while balancing their role just as an offensive creator in their own right. Devontae's had those issues with efficiency in the past. I think that's valid. It's not a guarantee. I think it's still not. I would say, he and Spencer Dinwiddie are interesting. They're two very similar players in that respect. New point guards and new situations. Poor percentages, but high upside in terms of just their ability to the assists they can rack up. 3-pointers in Graham's case, and just straight points in Dinwiddie's. I still think I prefer. I might lean more Graham as a top 100 guy than Dinwiddie, but
interesting. Okay,
but that would be dependent on him figuring things out relatively quickly, because he does look pretty rough right now, around the edges. For the other guy that I was going to remove, I went with some really boring options, just some of these fringe guys I was looking at. Like I had Dorian Finney-Smith in the top 100 when we were going over Dallas, and he's the kind of guy that's going to be within 10 to 20 slots of that range. So it's not like a wild take for me to take him out there. Like I'm not blowing anyone's doors off the hinges by saying that Dorian Finney-Smith might not make it there. I mean, he's just a guy who does a little bit of everything, and he will probably find a way to be productive and get to that range. Another guy, though, that I was thinking of, I had Kyle Anderson as a top 100 guy in Memphis. The more that I've watched from Memphis preseason, he is still very talented, and he's probably going to play a good amount, particularly with Dylan Brooks set to miss at least a couple weeks to start the season.
Right.
But I can see, but as they pivot more to Desmond Bane, and they hopefully, God willing, give more opportunity to DeAnthony Melton, I think that's going to put Brooks closer to that wing small forward role more often, while those two alternate out at shooting guard. And then that could push Kyle Anderson into more of a reserve role, because he can play multiple spots. He's a little Joe Inglesy in that he could be a very helpful guy, a connector, if you will, off the bench to help those second units. I mean, he's going to play, and I might get burned again by saying this, because I was like, Kyle Anderson was great immediately as last season started, and my advice the whole way is just like, yeah, but they have this guy and this guy and that guy, and eventually they're going to come back, and they never really did. So, I mean, Anderson could still really be another top 100 season. But, those are just some of the fringier guys that I could think of. And more so Finney-Smith. I think that's my official pick to remove.
Gotcha.
But, yeah, that is – Harry, this was a lot of fun. I feel like just throughout this process, we've learned a lot about these guys. And I think that this definitely warrants a mid-season checkup to see how we are doing. I think that could be pretty fun to revisit. Everyone, thank you again for checking this out. This is effectively going to be the last video that we put out for the NBA, the fantasy basketball offseason. So in that vein, I want to thank you all for all of the support, all of you who have tuned in and watched all these other videos that we have put out there. It means a lot to see the reception that some of these have received, especially for this series as well. And I was going to say, we're going to have a lot more stuff for the regular season, and I'm very much looking forward to expanding. Harry, I'm looking forward to you doing more stuff on here as well. I know you've got
absolutely
some cooking up. And you are you all are in for a treat once we get those videos going as well. Any final thoughts on this series, Harry, or just the off season in general?
Just some quick final thoughts. First of all, thank you, Alan. To all the viewers out there, Alan's been working his butt off, getting all this stuff, all these videos done, and all this stuff uploaded. So big thanks to you. And no, just looking forward to the season. Happy it's only a day away.
Yeah, I'm excited and incredibly excited. Everyone, thank you again. Subscribe to the Hoopball YouTube channel if you want more stuff like this in the future. Follow Hoopball on Twitter at Hoopball Fantasy. You can drop me a follow there as well. Harry, we're going to get you on Twitter eventually so that people can follow you as well. But yeah, thanks again, everyone. Good luck in your fantasy draft if you happen to have one on the final day of the season. And we will check in with you guys next time.